right, going to call the Finance Committee meeting for Lancaster City Council to order. It is 6 p.m.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for the Lancaster City Council Finance Committee to convene into executive session to consider issues related to the compensation of public employees pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22G1. The executive session should include the following individuals: Lancaster City Council members, Council President Uhl, Mayor Scheffler, Auditor Nettles, Law Director Hall, and Treasurer Stoughton.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to convene into executive session. Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
I'm a yes. We are in executive session.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for the Lancaster City Council Finance Committee to leave executive session and return to the regular meeting at this time.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to resume the regularly scheduled finance committee. Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
I'm a yes. We are back on the regular agenda for tonight's finance committee. The first item we have on the agenda is Resolution 8923. It's a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor and the Water Pollution Control Fund. Coming out of water, wastewater, Mr. James.
Thank you, Chairman McDaniel. I would like to call Mr. Mike Nixon to the podium to give us just a little more detail on this particular piece of legislation.
Thank you, members of finance. This resolution will allow us to continue processing the biosolids sludge at both plants for the rest of the year. We've had a pretty good year of moving material. If the resolution wouldn't pass, we would just have to put more into storage and have more odors than we already have, unfortunately. This is the bad time of year. We have high heat, high humidity, not a lot of wind. So if we can get some lower temperature, lower humidity, get the odors up, and the wind's blowing from west to east, we'll be doing much better. But I'd like to go ahead and appropriate this, and then if it happens to be more than we need, no harm, no foul. We'll just go back into the wastewater revenue fund for next year. But this will allow us to hopefully, we have about a 1 million gallon tank up the Upper Hocking, and it's about a quarter full right now. And we have 3 million gallon tank worth of tankage at Lawrence Street, and we have about 550,000 in storage. So that's pretty low for us. We typically run 2 or 3 full tanks. So if we can get the money, we'll keep processing the material, and hopefully we're going to get our digester online. Hopefully the boiler goes online this week, and if we can start digesting some of that material, the odors will hopefully be less as well. So I appreciate your consideration, and we'll wait until it passes or fails to figure out what we do through the rest of the year.
Okay, the total amount on that for everyone is $250,000. Is that right, Mr. Nixon? Mm-hmm. And that'll take you through the remainder of the year?
Probably be more than we need, but I just wanted to put enough in there that we could keep the press rolling as long as the weather's good and we can get out on. The material from Lawrence Street goes to the farmers' fields. The material from Upper Hocking goes to landfill because we don't make enough of it to utilize agronomically. So we'd like to keep the centrifuge and the press running, and this may be more than we need, but again, if it is, that money just goes back into the water pollution, the water revenue fund, wastewater revenue fund.
Any other questions? Mr. James, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Matlin will be my second, and we're going to ask for 2 readings on this.
Mr. Matlin is the second, and 2 readings on Resolution 8923. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
The next item on our agenda is Resolution 9023. It's a resolution to increase and decrease appropriations in the general fund for the purchase of 4 Ford police interceptors for the use by the Lancaster Police Department and to declare an emergency. Chief Snyder is here.
Good evening. This resolution has to do with the information from the last council meeting about getting ahead of the ball with our Ford Police Interceptor cruiser issue that we're facing now year to year. I've asked for 3 readings on this just to give it time to be discussed, get through a safety committee meeting so we can figure out any of the contingencies that we might need to on this plan. It is also included within our cash flow in our budget. It's just taking from an improvements fund that included our HVAC project, which has just hit so many obstacles, so it wouldn't be asking for new money, but it is $200,000, which would appropriate approximately 4 cruisers to our fleet to get ahead of the game. And if you don't remember from the last council meeting, what is happening is we are ordering basically in the 3rd window, which is post-January, just because of the way the finances work, and that causes significant delays up to a year, sometimes more than a year for some agencies to get vehicles to their fleet. And this would allow us to order in October, which is the very first part of the ordering window. And from what I can tell now, and speaking with other agencies, that gets you your cruisers in about 2 to 3 months. So we're not asking to increase our fleet. We're just asking to bump up the timing in which we replace the 3 to 4 cruisers per year to get them switched out.
Questions for Chief Snyder? Yes, Mr. James.
Chief Snyder, this is in addition to the other 2 we've already approved from the dealer in Marysville.
Correct. So the way the math works is that things we've purchased in '23 were budgeted for to be on that typical replacement plan. This is still that replacement plan. It would just take place approximately 3 to 4 months earlier in the ordering window, which I obviously did not budget for in this year, but the cash flow is present.
Other questions? So speaking with a little bit of experience in this area, I would say that every police department in the United States is ordering these cars. If we get ourselves in the queue quicker, we get our vehicles quicker and our fleet, and Chief Snyder, you didn't address it, but you did last meeting, the significant cost of maintaining your fleet.
Correct. I can't quote numbers here. I can basically say we are significantly higher in our vehicle maintenance this year than we were last year. If I gave you a percentage, I'm sure it would be over 30 to 40% higher than last year. I just
Thank
don't
you.
have that exact figure.
That's what I was looking at, and again, I know from experience that the way, as these cars, roll at 200 or 300 miles a day, 7 days a week, a lot of wear and tear. So this will allow us to get this program started a little earlier, and I assume in the future we'll be doing this, and this will be a one-time fill, and then next year we'll budget for it.
Correct. We would have this bump, and then we would just budget for October ordering from now on.
So, any other questions for Chief Snyder? All right, Mr. Ailes, would you second that?
Yes.
And we will have 3 readings on Resolution 9023. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is Resolution 9123, a resolution to increase receipts and appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the general fund. And this is coming out of safety. Mr. Matlin?
Yes, we've got the assistant chief and the fire chief back there. We were lucky enough to receive a grant, actually lucky enough to have somebody in the fire department apply for a grant, and then we received the money, I guess, and that's what the chief's asking for, to be able to spend the money.
Yeah, you took care of it, so
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. This was a great opportunity that, quite honestly, Assistant Chief Schultz found, and he did the heavy lifting as far as the background information and actually writing the grant and applying for it. So I just came up to kind of introduce, and if you have questions, I'm going to leave them to him.
Questions for the chief?
Thanks, Chief. Members of the council, thank you for the opportunity tonight. So the state of Ohio received money through the American Rescue Plan Act. Of those funds, Governor DeWine and the Ohio General Assembly set aside $250 million for first responders. Of that, to date, $35 million in retention grants have been given to over 10,000 first responders and over 309 agencies across the state of Ohio. The City of Lancaster Fire Department was fortunate enough to apply 14 months ago. We just received notification that we would be receiving an award for the amount of $280,000.
So I sent the chief 2 questions. One was the formula. It says a maximum of $4,000. Is everybody getting the $4,000, or do you have a formula for how everybody on the department's getting?
So initially the maximum grant per person was 10% of their salary, which is what we applied for as directed by the state. They lowered that number to $4,000 to be able to give it to more first responders across Ohio. So $4,000 is the grant award per employee across the board, and it's much below that threshold of 10%.
So the second question was, and there's no other way, no place else we can spend this money, correct? The grant was to
No, the grant
compensate employees.
The guideline is very specific, yes. It is
Okay.
a retention grant for our first responders.
Like I said, we appreciate you taking the bull by the horns on this and getting some money for the guys. This is awesome.
Thank you. Is there any other questions?
Other questions? No, I think, Chief, I think you covered it really well.
Thank you.
Again, as Councilman Matlin said, this is specifically for this purpose, and this is grant money in, and our firefighters benefit as a result of this particular grant. So, Mr. Matlin, what's your pleasure on that?
Because it's money in, money out, we're going to ask for suspension tonight, and Mr. Ehlers will second for me.
Suspension on 9123 with Mr. Ehlers the second. Next item on our agenda is ordinance 1923, an ordinance to enter into a permanent utility easement and right-of-way with Ohio Power Company, a unit of American Electric Power, for the relocation of facilities necessary for the construction of the new transfer station and to declare an emergency. Coming out of service, Mr. Porter.
Yes, thank you. This particular ordinance, we had the service committee meeting on Friday. Superintendent Fowler advised us that it is necessary for the new transfer station to relocate utilities for the construction. AEP has just provided those areas that are necessary to grant an easement for those utilities. And in order to keep construction on track, we would ask for suspension of this particular ordinance so those easements can be granted by the mayor as necessary.
Questions for Mr. Porter? This is pretty straightforward, and this is something that we need in order to accomplish the construction of the new transfer station. So you're asking for suspension. Mrs. Kreitz is the second on that?
That is correct.
All right, so we'll have suspension on 1923. Are there any departmental updates? The mayor has one first. Yeah.
So I was fortunate to be invited to spend the afternoon at the New Albany Google Data Center for a big announcement that they were making. They are going to invest another $1.7 billion in the 3 Central Ohio data centers. They didn't give the breakdown, so we don't know how much is coming to Lancaster. But they also disclosed that Google Columbus, and that would be the 3 data centers, are the focal point of the Google AI initiative. And it requires special processors that are much more capable than the typical file servers that are in the cloud, and that will be the focus of their efforts here. So we also know that the Lancaster Data Center will go into service on September 21st. So it's kind of an exciting time in Lancaster, and we're looking forward to more and bigger investments from Google.
Thank you. Other departmental updates? Chief Snyder.
Good evening. I just want to provide a couple updates about the police department of significance regarding our recruiting and hiring, which is obviously a nationwide issue for law enforcement everywhere. We've actually had a very good stride of recruiting in the last year. I checked our annual reports before I walked over here tonight. It looked like in 2021, at least it was reported, we had 58 officers at the end of the year. Last year, at the end of 22, we had 66 officers. And I was just updating Director Martin with our slew of conditional offers we've just made recently. I believe on our next slew of conditional offers here that are on the table will be at 74, one away from 75. And 75 was my goal for January of 24. I think we're probably going to hit that in September of 23, which is awesome. So we've already started appropriating a lot of that manpower at the police department just to change the way that we're doing things, and it's working out very well, and the word of mouth is getting out, so I'm very happy about that. In addition to that, I cannot name names, unfortunately, but we've had a very generous private donor contribute to our K-9 program. We had budgeted 2 ballistic vests for our 2 dogs. These run about $3,500 each, and they are ballistic protection for a K-9 when they're doing building searches or apprehensions. In total, that would have been about $7,000 to the taxpayers. This private donor came, met the dogs, spent a good couple hours with the dogs, had a good time with them, met them, took their photos. We're not posting any of that, but we definitely appreciate their donation. They were very generous and bought 2 ballistic vests for our dogs. So those will be taken care of at no cost to the city, which is a really big deal. Beyond that, a lot of good feedback about that program, jumping up and spinning that off. I was just updated about a building search 2 nights ago where 2 of our officers had a dog clear O'Reilly's on an alarm drop where it was dark and you would otherwise have to go into blind corners and blind rooms and dark rooms with an open door in the back. This dog, through the training that the officers did on their shifts and in service, were able to follow that dog around the building, and it cleared every room in that building. Obviously, thank God, nothing happened, but that is the purpose of that dog. That is the purpose of the dog. So that program is going very, very well for us, and the officers are continuing to learn how to use it to the best of their ability. That is all the updates that I had.
Great. Anybody have any questions for the chief on those updates? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other departmental updates? Yes.
I unfortunately have some sad news. After our last city council meeting, my longest serving employee, my office manager, who you all know well as your clerk, advised me that she has decided she would like to retire in January of 2024. So I apologize for outing her right now, here and now, but she wants to spend more time with her grandchildren, her family, her puppies. And I can't blame her, and I'm very excited for that opportunity for her. And since she was kind enough to give me such advance warning, I had the ability to speak to one of the paralegals in my office who's been with me since 2014, actually with my predecessor. And she has agreed to accept the position. So I will be moving one of my paralegals, the one who handles all of Judge Field's cases presently, to the office manager position. She's going to start training with Teresa here in the near future. And then our receptionist, who just started school for paralegal training, is actually going to move up into the empty paralegal position that Liz Martins will vacate when she becomes the office manager. So we anticipate doing all of that, not backfilling that reception position, saving a little bit of money and giving everybody some time to get trained up and acclimated to their new roles. And I'm very confident, very, very confident that, you know, that's going to work out great and it's going to be fine. But we're absolutely going to miss Teresa, as I'm sure all of you will, because she's assured me she is leaving you as well. Otherwise, I might kidnap her or something. I'd like to keep her that much, but I understand why she's leaving, and I appreciate all of her years of dedicated service, and I don't know how we'll do it without her, but we will definitely try. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you for your update, but it's kind of sad.
Bittersweet, I
information,
agree.
Yes.
Yep.
But we knew it was coming eventually, so, well, thank you. Any other departmental updates? Seeing none, President Noel, do you have anything for tonight's meeting prep?
We are all prepped.
We are all prepped. Any other items for finance? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make that motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. It is 6:41.
The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin at 6:45.
4 minutes.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our 2 locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change. The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our 2 locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Hi, I'm Mike Shook with the Ohio Glass Museum. Our museum was established to reflect the importance of the glassmaking industry in the history of Lancaster and Fairfield County. We value the support to help preserve that history. This month, we are honored to be chosen by the Buckeye Automotive Family's Buckeye Cares program. Buckeye Cares will make a generous donation with every car they sell. Thank you, Buckeye family, for helping the Ohio Glass Museum.
Good evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for this day and your blessings. We thank you for the opportunity to serve once again. We ask that you would be with us, that you would lead, guide, and direct us forward as we go about the business of the city. We ask in your son's name. Amen. Amen. I hereby call this meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Here.
Mr. Ailes?
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Here.
Mr. James?
Here.
Mr. Matlin?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Porter?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
And Mrs. Teener?
Here.
Let the record reflect that all 9 members of Lancaster City Council are in attendance this evening. Reading and disposing of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated August 14th, 2023.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Email dated August 17th, 2023 regarding the IT Telecom Committee Meeting agenda submitted by Mrs. Teener. Series of emails regarding meeting minutes submitted by Mrs. Teener. Email dated August 21st, 2023 regarding Service Committee meeting agenda submitted by Mr. Porter. Email dated August 23rd, 2023 regarding mosquito spraying submitted by Service Safety Director Paul Martin. Email dated August 27th, 2023 regarding Finance Committee meeting agenda submitted by Mr. McDaniel. And finally, an email dated August 28th, 2023 regarding code enforcement meeting submitted by Mr. Ehlers.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There's one letter dated August 17th, 2023 regarding 226 and 232 Ventura Place submitted by Marcy Fields, Executive Director, the Fairfield County Adam H. Board, 108 West Main Street, Lancaster, Ohio.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communication.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the communications. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. There are no special presentations or awards this evening. Are there any petitions or memorials?
There are none to be presented.
During this time, Lancaster City Council sets time aside to allow the voters and taxpayers of the city to address us on any item or issue they would like. If you would like to address Lancaster City Council tonight, we invite you to come forward, sign in at the podium with your name and address, and then state the same for the record. Once you begin your comments, we'll ask that per the rules of council, you keep your comments within a confine of 5 minutes or less. In addition, during this time, while City Council may choose to respond to you at a later portion in the meeting, they will not do so at this time. Is there anyone who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Yes, sir. You can go ahead and begin your comments and then sign in afterward if you don't mind.
Okay. My name is William Mason, 615 Lincoln Avenue. My house was built there in 1900. That was before cars were invented. The bridge was redone in front of our house in about 1989. Since then, it has been nothing but problematic. It's been reworked and reworked. I've called the street department a couple times this year. They've come out and dropped some patch in the edges of the bridge. That's not the issue that I'm calling them about. I called the water department since they were the last ones that worked out there. A guy from Phil from the meter department comes out and looks at it, and he didn't have any business trying to evaluate the situation. He was looking for the water line to be bouncing. Our houses are taking damage in the foundations. I've talked to my other neighbors around the neighborhood. It's like a magnitude 5 on a smartphone app. If you set it in the window, when the trucks go across the bridge and bounce into the water dip hole out in front of my house. You can't sleep. It sounds like a train wreck. It tries to bounce you off the couch or the toilet. I don't feel safe in my home right now. Something needs to be addressed out there where they worked. The water department dug a 12-foot hole in front of our house, and it was never properly filled back in, I don't believe. I'm a retired engineer. One of my neighbors is an engineer for ODOT, and we all agree, everybody feels the shaking, and you can see when the trucks are going past it, our houses are being beat apart.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here this evening. If you hang around, it may be that someone wants to comment as we get toward the end of the meeting.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? All right, well, thank you all for being here tonight. Are there reports of standing committees?
There are Water Pollution Control meeting minutes dated July 12th, 2023, and August 9th, 2023, submitted by Mr. James. Service Committee meeting minutes dated August 25th, 2023, submitted by Mr. Porter. And finally, the Finance Committee meeting minutes dated August 28th, 2023, submitted by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there reports of special committees?
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings this evening, so we'll move to the reading of resolutions, beginning with the third reading of temporary resolution 77-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor, increase receipts, and complete a fund-to-fund transfer in the Stormwater Sewer Fund 6006 and in the Stormwater Utility Reserve Fund 6019, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President. At this time, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution numbered 77-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 77-23. Discussion, Mr. James.
Certainly, even though we've had discussions about this in previous council meetings, as a reminder, this actually has to do with the East Main Street sewer separation that has to do with the engineering design. The total amount's $500,000 and is simply transferring from one fund to the other to be able to actually fund this particular task.
Thank you, Mr. James. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 77-23 passes 9-0. We now have second reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 80-23.
A resolution to accept and approve Lancaster Fairfield Public Transit System's zero tolerance drug and alcohol testing policy as approved by the Ohio Department of Transportation on July 21st, 2023, and to authorize updates to be made as needed by the director, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
Second of three readings, please.
Second to three readings on temporary resolution 80-23, temporary resolution 81-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor, increase receipts in the wastewater reserve fund 6029, and approve the issuance of a then and now certificate for payment of bills for the Ohio Water Development Loan for the Lateral D Trunk Sewer Phase 2 Campground Road Pump Station, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President. This is actually the second of three readings.
Second to three readings on temporary resolution 81-23, temporary resolution 85-23.
A resolution to create a new fund for the One Ohio Opioid Settlement Fund 2042 and to set up a revenue and expense accounts, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 85-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 85-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, the auditor is required to set this fund up for guidance from the state. This will track the One Ohio opioid settlement funds and allow for proper accounting.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion the council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 85-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 85-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 85-23 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 86-23.
A resolution to create a new fund for the temporary top TIF Fund 2060 and to set up revenue account and expense accounts, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 86-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 86-23. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, similar to the previous resolution, this will establish a new fund to account for the timber top TIF funds as they're received and allow them to be properly accounted for.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 86-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 86-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Resolution temporarily numbered 86-23 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 87-23.
A resolution to amend the certificate of appropriations and other sources with the county auditor, appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the general fund 1001, increase receipts and complete a fund transfer in the special projects fund 2037, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 8723.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 87-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel?
Yes, Mr. President. Last meeting, we heard from Court Administrator Jackie Long and Judge Fields regarding some issues they've had at the Columbian Building with the HVAC system and the roofing issues that they've been looking at. The amount of that repair is $10,500. I'm asking for suspension tonight to allow them to move forward with those repairs.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 8723.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 87-23. Mr. McDaniel.
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 87-23 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 88-23.
A resolution of intent to transfer the assets and operations of the Lancaster Fairfield Public Transit to Fairfield County, to authorize the Fairfield County Board of Commissioners to apply for grants on behalf of Lancaster Fairfield Public Transit and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 8823.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 88-23. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
Just a couple points. So the suspension is to coincide with a deadline for grants for this year for next year's operating funds. And then just to clarify or just make sure that we're on the same page, this is just the intent of transferring everything to the county. So we still have other issues to work out and other discussions to be had, but we need this letter of intent so we can put the county in the position to apply for those grants for operating funds for next year.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 8823.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 88-23. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
I don't have anything else.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Abstain.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 88-23 passes 8-0 with one abstention. We now have a series of resolutions for first reading, beginning with temporary resolution 89-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor in the Water Pollution Control Fund 6004, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Dole. This is the first of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 89-23, temporary resolution 90-23.
A resolution to increase and decrease appropriations in the General Fund 1001 for the purchase of 4 Ford Interceptor police cruisers for use by the Lancaster Police Department and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel?
First of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 90-23, temporary resolution 91-23.
A resolution to increase receipts and appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the General Fund 1001. Offered by Mr. Matlin, seconded by Mr. Ayers.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporary 91-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 91-23. Discussion, Mr. Matlin?
Yes, we heard from the fire chief and the assistant chief during finance. The fire department was lucky enough to receive a employee retention grant through the American Recovery Act, routed through the state of Ohio for $280,000. They have not received the money yet, but this will allow the auditor to spend that money by bonusing the firefighters, a one-time deal.
Okay, thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. Matlin?
Yes, Mr. President, I'll make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporary 91-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 91-23. Discussion, Mr. Matlin?
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 91-23 passes 9-0. Are there any further resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we'll move to the reading of ordinances, beginning with the second reading of temporary ordinance 16-23.
An ordinance to amend permanent ordinance 13-23, repeal and replace existing permanent ordinance 13-23, offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. Ailes.
Second of 3 readings, please.
Second of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 16-23. Now, first reading on temporary ordinance 19-23.
An ordinance to enter into a permanent utility easement and right-of-way with Ohio Power Company, a unit of American Electric Power, for the relocation of facilities necessary for the construction of the new transfer station and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. Porter and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. Porter.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of ordinance temporarily numbered 1923.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 19-23. Discussion, Mr. Porter?
Yes, as we discussed in Finance Committee, this will allow construction to continue on the transfer station uninterrupted and grant the mayor the authority to enter into an easement for utilities with American Electric Power.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Porter. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. Porter.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to pass ordinance temporarily numbered 1923.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 19-23. Discussion, Mr. Porter?
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 19-23 passes 9-0. Are there any further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we have no tabled legislation. Does anyone have any unfinished business they'd like to talk about tonight? Does anyone have any new business they'd like to talk about tonight? Ms. Teener?
Yes, may I address Mr. Mason?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you for coming. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Safety Director Martin, do you know anything about this? Has it been discussed in any meetings or anything, this issue that, I have not heard of this.
No, Mr. Mason's lived there probably since the 1990s, a long time. He's been there for a long time.
74?
And he's actually talked about some other things with me in
Okay.
regards to that area and that neighborhood. I know that categorically, you can have a street, semis and bumps and streets, and you can feel vibration. I feel them in City Hall. So I don't know what to do. That is a state route. That is a state route bridge, trying to reduce a bump to prevent an impact of a load that's carried by a truck or a car. I actually, I have no doubt what he's saying is truthful. No question at all. I think it is happening. And vibrations going through the soils, through vibration through the course of time can have an impact there.
I think Mr. Mason has a big,
Spraying off of a semi-truck, we have to check our driveway every single morning for debris that's falling and breaking off vehicles. We had a truck about 4 months ago hit the dip, broke the ball joint, ended up in my front yard. We had a car one evening hit the dip and crashed and took out the telephone pole. It's a problem, and it's getting worse and worse. I've lived there forever and seen it transform into what it is now.
So I will promise you, I will get our engineering department. We have a very good bridge engineer working for us now on assessment. But this is something that would, to replace a bridge, I can't make that assessment right now. To try to minimize the vibrations and things like that.
yeah,
We'll try
I
to
know
see
it's a
that.
state route, but since he has reached out to him and things haven't seemed to work, do you know if maybe the engineers have reached out to the state since it is a state route?
I cannot answer that. I don't know. I'm not sure. That bridge, we have very few bridges that we maintain in the city.
Right.
Law
Well-
director here is reminding me, most of them are maintained by
Well,
the
I
city
just would
engineers.
guess that, this is just me, that if something we can't do something, they wouldn't reach out to the people that are responsible to do it. That's what I guess my thing is, if they would just, like we do, if, we go to somebody and if it's, and then they pass it on, and I didn't know. I'll follow up, though.
Sir, I'm sorry, we've really passed the time where there's public comment. Yeah, I understand. I want to encourage you to feel free to connect with Service Safety Director Martin or Ms. Teener after the work done. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Paul.
All right, anyone else have anything they'd like to discuss in new business this evening? Okay, then we'll ask the clerk to read the upcoming list of scheduled meetings.
The next meeting of Lancaster City Council is September the 11th. The meeting following is September 25th, both meetings here in council chambers at 6:30 p.m. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Safety, September the 11th at 8:30 a.m. at the 1897 Conference Room. Finance, September the 11th at 6 p.m. here in council chambers. Water pollution, September 13th at 8:30 a.m. at the 1897 Conference Room. IT Telecom, September 15th at 8 a.m. at the 1897 Conference Room. And finally, Finance, September 25th at 6 p.m. here in council chambers.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills?
There's one bill payable to MNCO for publication of legislation in the amount of $132.10.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to pay the bill.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pay the bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I know of no need for an executive session, therefore a motion to adjourn is in order.
Mr. President, I'd like to make that motion. We adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Our meeting is adjourned. Please remember to sign your legislation. Have a great day.